And then 100. And he struck him out with a high fastball.
One of the best hitters in the game.
Kyle Schwarber with a tape measure shot.
There's no park that can hold this guy.
Kyle Schwarber has done it again.
When Schwarber comes up with the game on line, you feel like something's going to happen.
Ladies and gentlemen, buckle up because what I'm about to tell you might just shake the entire foundation of Philadelphia Phillies baseball. We're talking about a potential move so controversial, so absolutely mind-blowing, that it could either catapult this team into World Series glory or send them spiraling into decades of regret. The MLB offseason rumor mill isn't just churning, it's absolutely exploding. And right at the center of this firestorm is a name that should make every Phillies fan's heart skip a beat: Aiden Miller. Now, I know what you're thinking. Aiden Miller? The kid who's been tearing it up down in AAA? That's right, folks. We're talking about one of the brightest prospects in the entire Philadelphia organization, a player ranked number 36 in all of baseball, and suddenly his name is being thrown around trade discussions like he's some kind of bargaining chip. And here's where things get absolutely wild, because this isn't just about Miller. Oh no, this rabbit hole goes much, much deeper. We're talking about the potential shakeup of your entire infield, questioning whether guys like Bohm and Stott are actually the long-term answers everyone thought they were, and whether the Phillies front office is about to make the biggest gamble of the decade. Let me paint you the full picture here, because this story has more twists than a playoff game in the 9th inning. Bleacher Report just dropped an absolute bombshell article listing the top prospects across the entire major leagues who could be traded this offseason, and guess who comes in at lucky number 7? Our guy, Aiden Miller. Now, this isn't some clickbait speculation from a random blogger in his basement. This is Bleacher Report, one of the most respected names in sports journalism, essentially putting a target on Miller's back and saying to every general manager in baseball, "Hey, this kid is available. Come get him." But let's talk about what makes Aiden Miller so special, because if you're going to understand why this potential trade would be absolutely devastating or potentially brilliant, you need to know what we're working with here. This young man just completed a season that can only be described as spectacular. Playing across AA and AAA, Miller suited up for 116 games and posted slash lines that would make any scout's eyes light up like a Christmas tree. .264 batting average, 392 on-base percentage, and 433 slugging percentage. Those aren't just good numbers, folks. Those are elite prospect numbers. And the production doesn't stop there. We're talking about 43 extra base hits, 14 home runs, 42 RBIs, and here's the kicker that should make every Phillies fan's jaw drop: 59 stolen bases. 59. In today's game, speed like that is an absolute premium commodity. This kid isn't just a power threat. He's not just someone who can get on base. He's a complete five-tool player who can change games with his legs. The scouting reports are raving about his offensive ceiling, describing him as having a 55-hit tool and 60 power profile. For those who don't speak scout speak, that basically means this kid has elite potential at the plate. Now here's where the story gets even more interesting. Miller was drafted as a high school shortstop in the 2023 draft, and guess what? He's been better than expected defensively at short. Though the experts think third base might ultimately be his long-term home, which, and we'll get to this in a minute, creates some absolutely fascinating roster implications for Philadelphia. The kid has literally everything you want in a modern baseball player: power, speed, defensive versatility, high baseball IQ, and he's still just scratching the surface of his potential. But according to Bleacher Report's analysis, there's one massive problem standing in Aiden Miller's way, and it's not his talent. It's geography. It's timing. It's the reality of the Phillies' current roster construction. See, Philadelphia has Bohm locked in at third base with a tendered contract for 2026. They've got Trea Turner absolutely cemented at shortstop through an 11-year, $300 million contract that runs until 2033. That's not a typo, folks. 2033. That means unless something dramatic happens, Trea Turner will be the Philadelphia Phillies shortstop for the next 8 years. So where exactly does that leave Aiden Miller? According to the cold, hard logic of roster construction, he's essentially blocked at every position where he projects to play. He can't move to short because Turner isn't going anywhere. Third base is occupied by Bohm. Second base has Bryson Stott. The kid is stuck in organizational purgatory, burning through his development years in the minor leagues, while the major league club tries to win championships now. And that brings us to the absolutely brutal reality that Bleacher Report laid out in their assessment. Their window of contention is closing, so their front office could be in an all-in mode to attack this winter. That phrase right there, window of contention is closing, should send shivers down the spine of every Phillies fan, because it acknowledges what we've all been thinking, but nobody wants to say out loud. This current core, this group that's been to the World Series, that's been to the NLCS multiple times, they're not getting younger. Bryce Harper, while still performing at an elite level, is getting older. The pitching staff, despite its strengths, is another year closer to potential decline. Kyle Schwarber, JT Realmuto, these are aging veterans who are in their prime contention years right now. The Phillies don't have the luxury of waiting for Aiden Miller to develop at the major league level. They need to win championships yesterday. This creates the most agonizing dilemma any front office can face. Do you trade away your future for a better shot at winning now? Do you cash in your lottery ticket before you even know if you've won the jackpot? Because make no mistake, that's exactly what trading Aiden Miller would be. You'd be taking a player who could potentially be an all-star, a franchise cornerstone, a guy you build around for the next decade, and you'd be shipping him out for presumably a win-now piece that can help you in 2025 and 2026. Now, this isn't the first time we've had this conversation about Aiden Miller. His name has popped up in trade rumors before, and here's the thing that makes these discussions so complicated. It's always a sliding scale of value. What are you getting in return versus what are you giving up? If you're talking about trading Miller for somebody like Ketel Marte, that elite second baseman who can impact your lineup immediately, then maybe you start having a different conversation. But that's not necessarily what's on the table right now, and that's what makes this whole situation so precarious. Let's shift gears for a moment and talk about the elephant in the room, or rather, the two elephants playing second and third base for your Philadelphia Phillies right now, Bryson Stott and Alec Bohm. Because here's the question that I think needs to be asked more directly and more honestly than it has been to this point. Are these guys actually the long-term solutions everyone thought they were? Are they the pieces you build a championship team around, or are they good players who might ultimately be holding back the ceiling of this roster? Let's start with Trea Turner because he's the easiest piece of this puzzle to address. Turner just came off arguably his best season in a Phillies uniform, and frankly, one of the best seasons of his entire career. He led the National League in batting average, showcased dramatically improved defense that answered a lot of critics, and proved that the organizational strategy of turning him into more of a contact and speed guy rather than a power hitter was absolutely the right call. Turner got on base, he stole bases, and he let the big boppers behind him in the lineup do the damage. That $300 million contract that looked potentially questionable a year ago, it's looking a whole lot better now. Turner isn't going anywhere, nor should he. But then we get to Bohm and Stott, and this is where things get murky, complicated, and honestly kind of frustrating. These are two players who were absolutely beloved by the organization, viewed as the young cornerstones of the future, the homegrown talents who were going to carry this team for years to come. And yet, if we're being brutally honest, both of them have kind of plateaued in their own unique ways. Neither has taken that next leap forward that transforms a good player into a great one, that turns a solid contributor into an all-star. Let's look at Bryson Stott's 2024 season because the numbers tell a story that's equal parts encouraging and concerning. He hit 13 home runs, drove in 66 runs, posted a .328 on-base percentage, and slugged .391 across 499 at-bats. He collected 128 hits and struck out 91 times. Those are perfectly respectable numbers for a second baseman. They're fine. They're solid. They're the kind of production that keeps you in the lineup every day. But are they special? Are they game-changing? Are they the numbers that make opposing pitchers lose sleep at night? Absolutely not. Compare that to Alec Bohm, who posted 11 home runs, 59 RBIs, a .331 on-base percentage, and a .409 slugging percentage. He collected 133 hits with 82 strikeouts across 464 at-bats. Now, Bohm dealt with some injury issues during the season that cost him playing time, which definitely impacts those counting stats like RBIs. But here's the thing, and this is important. The production issues weren't purely injury-driven. When Bohm was on the field, he wasn't crushing it. He wasn't dominating. He was just kind of existing as a league-average third baseman, which is fine if you're a rebuilding team, but potentially problematic if you're trying to win a World Series. And here's what should really concern Phillies fans. There were legitimate stretches during the 2024 season where you could make a compelling argument that Edmundo Sosa was simply a better option to have in the lineup and in the field than Bryson Stott. Let that sink in for a moment. The guy you thought was your franchise second baseman, the cornerstone of your infield for the next decade, was being legitimately challenged for playing time by a utility player. Now, to be absolutely clear, this has nothing to do with Stott's defense, which remains elite. The kid can pick it at second base with the best of them, but if what we saw from Trea Turner in 2024 is legitimate improvement defensively and all indications suggest it absolutely is, then that actually makes Stott a little bit less essential to what Philadelphia is trying to build here. Think about it logically. If Turner is now providing plus defense at short, if his range has improved and he's making the plays you need him to make, then you don't necessarily need Stott purely for his glove work. You need production. You need offense. You need guys who can get on base and drive in runs in high-leverage situations. And while Stott can certainly do those things at a competent level, is competent enough when your championship window is supposedly closing? Now, whenever we start talking about prospects, and Aiden Miller specifically, we have to address the uncomfortable truth that makes these discussions so difficult. Prospects are inherently risky. They're lottery tickets. There could be, rather than is. For every prospect who turns into Mike Trout or Mookie Betts or Ronald Acuna Jr., there are dozens who flame out, who never figure out major league pitching, who can't handle the pressure, who get injured, who just never develop the way everyone hoped they would. That's the brutal reality of baseball prospect evaluation. It's more art than science, and even the best talent evaluators in the world get it wrong constantly. I'll be the first to admit that I personally value what we see at the major league level to a significantly higher degree than what prospects are doing in the minors. Too often, prospects get built up into these mythical figures, these potential saviors who are going to revolutionize your franchise when they arrive, and then they get to the big leagues and reality hits them in the face like a 98-mile-per-hour fastball. They strike out, they struggle, they fail to adjust, and suddenly that can't-miss prospect is an organizational depth piece or a trade chip for someone else's problem. Aiden Miller is still incredibly young, still very early in his developmental trajectory, and full transparency, I don't watch a ton of minor league baseball. I follow the statistics as closely as possible. I read the scouting reports. I trust the experts, but I'm not down there watching every at-bat at AAA Lehigh Valley. However, I do have a trusted source, a buddy who covers baseball for the Reading Eagle, who has watched Miller on basically an every-game basis throughout his minor league journey. And this guy, Jared Montalto, swears to me with absolute conviction that Aiden Miller is a future star. Not a future solid player, not a future serviceable major leaguer, a future star, someone who will be an impact player at the highest level. Now, I'm not blindly taking his word as gospel, but I'm also not going to completely dismiss the opinion of someone who has actually watched this kid play hundreds of games. And that's what makes this potential trade conversation so fascinating and so terrifying. If Miller truly is that future star, if he's the real deal, then trading him for a marginal upgrade at second or third base would be an absolute disaster. It would be the kind of move that haunts a franchise for decades. The kind of trade that gets general managers fired and becomes a cautionary tale for future front offices. Which brings me to the mock trade that's been making the rounds on social media. And let me tell you, this one is absolutely wild. The proposal involves 3 teams: the Phillies, the Orioles, and the Nationals. Baltimore would send Mackenzie Gore, who had an incredible 2024 season, and Keibert Ruiz to the Phillies. Philadelphia would receive Adley Rutschman, who has been discussed as a potential JT Realmuto replacement for quite some time now, and the Nationals would walk away with Nick Castellanos, Aiden Miller, Carson DeMartini, and Caden Bowden, who's the Orioles' number 10 prospect. Let's break down why this trade is both fascinating and fundamentally flawed. The prize piece in this entire deal is pretty clearly Aiden Miller. That's the centerpiece that makes everything else work. Without Miller, the Nationals probably aren't even interested in having this conversation. And that right there should tell you everything you need to know about Miller's value around the league. Other organizations see him as a foundational piece, someone you build around, not someone you casually include in a 3-team mega deal. But here's my biggest issue with this entire premise. The JT Realmuto situation needs to get resolved before any of these conversations even happen. If you can ink Realmuto to a deal that isn't incredibly disruptive to your overall financial plans, you do it immediately. You do it before you even think about trading for Adley Rutschman. You do it even if it means addressing Realmuto before you figure out the Kyle Schwarber situation. And speaking of Schwarber, the order of operations this offseason is absolutely fascinating from a strategic standpoint. Kyle Schwarber is pretty clearly priority number 1 for this organization. Everyone seems universally in agreement that you need to get him under contract before his price point rises to a level that becomes prohibitive. But here's the catch. Schwarber understands the game from the other side of the negotiating table. He knows he's one of the most highly marketable and desired free agents on the market. He knows he has leverage. He knows that multiple teams are going to throw significant money at him. So he has absolutely no incentive to rush into a deal with Philadelphia. Time is on his side. Every day that passes is another day some other team might up their offer. That's just smart business. But let's get back to this mock trade and why it's problematic beyond just the Realmuto factor. The idea that Adley Rutschman is some kind of automatic upgrade, some guaranteed improvement over what JT gives you, is frankly not supported by the recent evidence. Rutschman has not played particularly good baseball over the past calendar year. He's been fine, he's been serviceable, but he hasn't been the elite difference maker that his rookie hype suggested he would become. Meanwhile, Realmuto, despite being older and clearly past his absolute peak, still brings intangible value that doesn't show up in traditional statistics. The way JT calls a game, the way he manages a pitching staff, his leadership in the clubhouse, his experience in big moments, these are things you cannot quantify with WAR or OPS+. And yes, I fully acknowledge that Realmuto isn't the best catcher in baseball anymore. That ship has probably sailed. But when you look around the league at the available options, at the realistic possibilities you could actually acquire, there aren't a lot of clear upgrades. There just aren't that many elite catchers in baseball, period. And the ones who exist are either franchise cornerstones who aren't going anywhere, or prospects who come with their own significant question marks. So my stance remains pretty straightforward. Just get JT Realmuto under contract, and suddenly we're not even having these conversations about trading for Rutschman or giving up Aiden Miller in some convoluted 3-team deal. Sign your proven veteran to a reasonable short-term extension, maintain continuity behind the plate, and keep your prized prospect in the organization where he belongs. But here's where I think the real conversation needs to happen, and it's something that hasn't been addressed head-on quite enough. There absolutely has to be some level of change this offseason. There are no ifs, ands, or buts about this. The Phillies have been doing these little tweaks, these marginal improvements around the edges of the roster, and it clearly hasn't been enough. They've built a really good team, a playoff team, a team that can compete with anybody on any given day. But they haven't built a championship team. Not yet. And at some point, you have to acknowledge that and make bold moves accordingly. Now, I'm not saying it's blow up the roster territory. Bryce Harper is obviously staying. He's the franchise. Trea Turner is coming back and playing at a high level. The pitching staff is still going to be a major strength of this team next year when you factor in all the different options they have available. But I do genuinely wonder if a significant shakeup at second base or third base could be the type of opportunity that changes the identity of this team. Could moving on from Stott or Bohm, bringing in a different player with a different skill set, be the catalyst that finally pushes this roster over the championship hump? The million-dollar question, of course, is whether Aiden Miller is actually ready for that opportunity. I genuinely don't know the answer. He's still young, still developing, still figuring out the nuances of professional baseball. But what I am increasingly curious about, and what I think should concern every Phillies fan, is whether Alec Bohm or Bryson Stott are truly the long-term solutions everyone assumed they would be. We had extensive conversations, particularly during last offseason, about the future of Alec Bohm and the likelihood of him being included in trade packages. His name was constantly floated in rumors. But I don't think we've addressed the Bryson Stott situation with quite the same level of brutal honesty. And I have to say, I'm increasingly underwhelmed by what Bryson Stott has become as a Major League Baseball player. That's not an easy thing to admit, because I was a huge Stott believer, especially coming off his 2023 season. Let's look at his year-by-year progression, or, in this case, regression, because the numbers tell a story that should genuinely concern the front office. In 2023, which was his second full season as a starter, Stott absolutely broke out. He hit .280 at the plate, posted a .329 on-base percentage, and .419 slugging percentage, both career highs. He belted 15 home runs, drove in 62 runs, and posted a 4.3 WAR, which is legitimately impressive for a young second baseman. That was the season that made everyone believe Stott was the answer, that he was the guy who would man second base for the Phillies for the next decade. But then came 2024, and instead of taking another step forward, instead of building on that success and becoming an even better player, Stott kind of stagnated. His home run total dropped to 13. His batting average fell to the 2.60s. His on-base and slugging percentages both declined. Nothing catastrophic, nothing that screams bust, but also nothing that suggests he's on a trajectory toward becoming an elite player. He's settled into being a solid, dependable, perfectly fine second baseman. And again, I keep coming back to this question. Is perfectly fine good enough when you're trying to win a World Series? If you'd asked me after the 2023 season to predict which player would take the next leap forward between Bryson Stott and Alec Bohm, I would have said Stott 10 times out of 10 without hesitation. I saw the vision for what he could become. Maybe not the next Chase Utley, because those are impossibly large shoes to fill and unfair expectations to place on anyone, but potentially a long-term, above-average second baseman who could be a cornerstone of a championship team. But sitting here today, reflecting on his 2024 performance and his overall developmental arc, I'm just not sure I feel as cemented in that belief anymore. Bryson Stott is fine, he's good, he's better than what a lot of other teams around the league have as their everyday second baseman, but is he a World Series winning second baseman? Is he the guy you feel confident relying on in the biggest moments of October baseball? I'm genuinely not sure I can answer yes to that question anymore. And that uncertainty is what should drive the Phillies to at least explore their options this offseason. Whether that means having genuine belief that Aiden Miller is ready to step into a major league role, whether it means looking at external options through free agency or trade, something needs to be on the table. This organization cannot simply run back the same roster, make minimal changes, and expect different results. That's the definition of insanity, and Phillies fans deserve better than another season of almost but not quite. The food for thought question I want to pose, and something I don't think has been discussed nearly enough, is this. Should the Phillies seriously consider moving on from Bryson Stott? not as a salary dump, not as a punishment, but as a strategic decision to upgrade a position where they're currently getting good but not great production. If there's a trade out there that brings back a significantly better player, shouldn't Dave Dombrowski at least pick up the phone and have that conversation? Now, to be completely fair to Stott, maybe this is just a belief gap. Maybe he gets into the lab this offseason, adds a little more power to his swing, figures out how to hit left-handed pitching more consistently, and we're talking about a completely different player in 2025. That's absolutely possible. Baseball players develop at different rates, they have breakout seasons at unexpected times, and Stott is still relatively young with room for improvement. But based on what we've seen over the past 2 seasons, betting on that dramatic improvement feels increasingly like wishful thinking rather than realistic expectation. And that brings us full circle to Aiden Miller and whether the Phillies should seriously consider including him in trade packages. My position remains pretty clear. I would not move Aiden Miller without getting a truly significant piece in return. We're not talking about a marginal upgrade at second base or an aging veteran on an expiring contract. We're talking about a genuine difference maker, someone who demonstrably improves your chances of winning a championship in the next 2 years. If that player exists and is available, then maybe you have a conversation. But you don't trade Miller just to shake things up or to make a move for the sake of making a move. The stakes are simply too high. This organization is in genuine win-now mode, but they also can't completely mortgage their future. It's a delicate balance, and getting it wrong could set the franchise back for years. If you trade Miller and he becomes an all-star for another team while you're rebuilding 3 years from now, that's the kind of mistake that defines a front office's legacy in the worst possible way. So where does that leave us? The Phillies have some genuinely difficult questions to answer this offseason. Are Bohm and Stott the long-term answers? Is Aiden Miller ready to contribute at the major league level? Should they be more aggressive in pursuing external upgrades? What's the right balance between competing now and preserving future assets? These aren't easy questions, and reasonable people can disagree on the answers. The MLB offseason is just getting started, and the rumors are going to fly fast and furious over the next few months. Names are going to be floated, mock trades are going to circulate, speculation is going to run rampant. Through all of that noise, Phillies fans need to keep their eye on what actually matters, building the best possible roster to compete for championships while not completely destroying the future in the process. So what do you think? Should the Phillies even consider trading Aiden Miller, or would that be organizational malpractice? Are Stott and Bohm the long-term answers, or is it time to explore alternatives? What moves would you make this offseason to finally get this team over the championship hump?